I can't remember which Beatles died.
Okay, fine. Daddy, hold him. I don't know why he doesn't love Mama anymore.
Grasp me, father.
Maybe the reason why he wants Daddy to hold him is because he sees the whiskey up here.
He's like, I'll have some of that.
Because, obviously, we would have whiskey sitting on our desks because this is the Super Whiskey Bros podcast.
And that's the only place that we keep beverages, on desks, next to children. No, that didn't sound right.
Mm-hmm. On children next to desks. I like to use them as a cup holder sometimes.
Fun fact, babies' heads are so flat.
Yeah, well, like
they use as a drink table.
Well, like they have that spot right in the middle, and the drink kind of sinks into it, and it stays in place.
I could use that as a shot glass, actually. For legal reasons, that's a joke.
But either way, Tyler.
Sean.
In the words of Hector Barbosa, what are you drinking?
What are you drinking? He did say that. So fun fact. At this moment, what I'm joking on.
Are you drinking Glenfiddich?
No, I hate Glenfiddich so much.
That's why I figured where the cough was come from.
Sorry. I'm drinking water right now. I'm going to be having
the strong stuff.
Yes, the strong stuff. I usually never touch the stuff. There's shit in it. But I'll be pouring myself a glass of something here in a moment, but I've not been able to wake myself up this morning, and my throat is quite dry because everything is dry here in the state that I'm in, where it is nothing but no moisture and lots of snow. I shouldn't say lots and lots of snow, but there's a fair bit of snow.
Yeah. Significantly more than what we got. We had 2 snowstorms, I'll put that in quotes, snowstorms, and we got a grand total of like 3.5 inches.
We had closer to, I think we had closer to 8 total between the whole thing.
Yeah, I was talking
That's really crazy.
I was talking to Mom yesterday. She said she was thinking it was about 9 or 10.
It could have been that much.
Yeah.
That's one thing that me and Daenerys Targaryen have in common. We do love getting 8 inches of snow.
Ha 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 hee hee ho ho ha 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 ho 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 ha.
Penis.
Indeed. Well, I got another bottle of Evan Williams Bottled in Bond because not only is this stuff good and it's 50 horsepower, but also I really like it. And it's I got a 1.75. And it was cheaper. So the Elijah Craig Elijah Craig small batch that I got that I like is $30. The 1.75, and that's for $7.50 of Elijah Craig. The Evan Williams, a 1.75, is $27.
Fantastic.
So I mean, why get anything else?
I'm right now. I'm still trying to go through and discover all of the more cask strength bourbons that I like. Trying to go through and get more of them. And so far, I'll be honest, the most disappointing one. I still like it. I should clarify that I still very much like this. So far I'm moist. So far I'm most disappointed in the Elijah Craig, actually, which is interesting because I really like the straight, just their off-the-shelf standard bourbon. But I don't know. I think their cask strength's a little too sweet for me.
Yeah. Well, see that's the thing when you have a cask strength That doesn't necessarily mean better, right? Because like they'll mix it with because they do some mixing and blending before it goes into the barrel, but then sometimes they'll do more mixing and blending after it comes out of the barrel, and then they water it down after that. So if it's just cask strength, it's just straight out of the cask, then they don't their signature flavors will come from the blending, and if it's cask strength, it won't be blended.
Oh, of course, and I mean, like, my biggest thing is I just want to see what everyone's cask strength tastes like. It's more of a curiosity thing for me. Obviously, it's no longer the signature thing of anyone, and that's fine, that's cool, it's whatever. But I mean, I've found that my favorite of all time, hands down, or I guess I'll just say my top two because I really don't want to pick a favorite. It's the cask strength. It was like our local liquor store's reserve barrel of
The Woodford.
Well, there was Woodford and gosh darn it, what was the other one that I couldn't? Oh yeah, Maker's Mark.
Oh yeah,
It was
I forgot you got that too. Yeah.
I think I had you try both of them, but at least one of them. I'm trying to remember now.
I don't remember the Maker's Mark, but the Woodford was really good.
The Woodford was very good, but the Maker's Mark they're both just slightly different in their own way, and those have just been my two favorite bourbons of all time. So just trying to going out and finding that, since I was like, I really like these cask strengths, let's go see what the other ones taste like. But so far, nothing's really kind of been on the same level. Yeah. But I'm happy.
Oh, speaking of interesting things, last night, so it was... I'm not going to say it was bad, because it wasn't. It was good, but it was nowhere near as good as I was hoping it would be. I asked Brooke to make me a dirty martini, but we didn't have any olives to put olive brine in. But we did have pickled jalapenos, and so she used some of that brine instead. It was not as good as I was really hoping it would be, because it sure seemed like it should have been really good.
That sounds like it would have been great.
And I'm thinking maybe it would have been good if I had made it an extra dry, so less vermouth. I think putting the standard amount of vermouth in it ruined it. Which would make sense then why when Iron Man ordered a martini, when he ordered his martini extra dirty, he said extra dirty, extra dry, which would make sense because extra dry means less vermouth. So maybe if you want a dirty martini, you want less vermouth in it.
I believe you. But I don't know. I don't ever mix drinks. I just every once in a while, I'll make an old fashioned. But the things that I want, I just want to be able to drink it out of the bottle or just pour it into a glass and just go. I don't like taking the time. So because of that, I also have no clue what different amounts of vermouth would do to a drink.
Yeah. Well, see, I'll tell you what. One of my very favorite drinks in the entire world. You said you don't like to take the time to you don't like to take the time to make drinks. One of my favorite drinks in the entire world takes hardly any making at all. The way that I make mojitos. It goes like this. You take a sugar cube and you drop it into a Collins glass. Then you take some mint, slap it, and stuff that into the bottom of the Collins glass. You take one lime that you cut into quarters and shove that down into the Collins glass, and then once that's all shoved together, you start to muddle it with your muddler, and then having the lime on top of the mint prevents the muddler from breaking up the chlorophyll cells in the mint, and so you don't get any of that bitter, nasty chlorophyll taste that Brooke loves so much. And so you don't get any of that taste. You just get mint essence all through it, and then you pour in your rum, and then you stir it, get everything mixed together, and then you stir it with your straw, and then you fill it with seltzer, and that's your mojito. It's super easy. It takes almost no doing.
Even doing a regular mojito doesn't. It's not like it's a lot of work. Mm-hmm. It's just I don't want to do it. Like when I get home from work, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna have a drink. I'm going to pour a drink, and I'm going to sit down.
Well, see, that was what I did with the martini last night. I came in from work and I sat down and I said, hey Brooke, will you make me a martini?
Excuse me, bartender. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. I've always kind of wanted to. I don't know why I've never tried this because it seems like something I would love to do.
It's like,
hold on 1 second. I'm getting I'm getting a word from the producer. What'd you say?
Yes, that's why I paused. I was hearing.
More goth than drinking chlorophyll.
There's nothing more goth than drinking chlorophyll. I disagree. All right.
The whole blood of my enemies thing.
Well, if you're drinking chlorophyll, it's the blood of your enemies. Then what? That's what, like vegan goth?
Yes, vegan goth. I love it.
Anyways,
also,
yeah, we've been speaking for 10 minutes. The recording says 15 minutes, but it took us 5 minutes to fix our audio issues. We've been talking for 10 minutes about nothing, and that sounds like us. Let's direct our nothing towards a purpose.
We might as well. We have an odd topic today.
We have a very odd topic today. We wanted to talk about games that we liked from when we were younger, specifically games that probably weren't that popular. And I'm going to segue into the topic by continuing on a game that we started talking about last week or the week before. Technically, we recorded it last week, but we cut it into 2 episodes. And
because we got so incredibly off topic that we're like, this could be 2 episodes.
Yeah. And so yeah, we cut it into 2 episodes, and and so I don't remember which episode I wound up putting this particular thing in, but the game that I listed had the contender for when we were talking about based solely on how the game allows you to immerse and what it allows you to do, and when, like, when, if at all, it breaks the immersion that you had set up. And I said, based on that particular rubric, the game that is in the running for best game of all time was King's Quest VIII: Mask of Eternity, and that was a game from my childhood. It came out when I was 6 years old, and so I think that is a fair game to start on, because I don't think that game probably was extremely popular, but anyone who's listening to us is likely our age, and most people, I think, weren't playing that style of game at 6, 7, 8 years old. So I think that game among our audience, it would be a very not well-known game. And even in gamers of the time, I think that game wasn't as popular. Like, the rest of the King's Quest games were super popular, but I think it was so far out of the ordinary from the other King's Quest games that people didn't like it as much. And so for that reason, I think even at the time it wasn't as popular as it could have been.
That's the interesting thing is I think, well, I don't know why I say I think, I know. We were young enough when this came out that neither of us were going to have remembered any kind of public response from this game. Not only would we have not just remembered it, we didn't really connected to the internet in really any way. So it was more like it was more like we wouldn't have known the public response at the time.
Yeah,
but you are right. It was shockingly different because you switched from a very traditional point-and-click adventure game to not quite full-on action adventure, and definitely not an RPG. Not really. What would you call it? You still call it action adventure for the time?
It was so for how it was, and then with the level up system, and then the getting new equipment. It was styled. It was called action adventure at the time, but RPG wasn't really a classification of video game much at that time. It would be an action RPG is how we would classify it today. At the time, it was an action adventure game.
Well, it was very. The RPG elements were there and they existed, but I mean, man, they were really, really slight. I mean, honestly, think about it. Those were some slight elements.
Well, I mean, like, there are certain things that are today staples of the RPG platform, and you don't really see on any other genre for the most part. Like the item menu bar, the inventory. The only time you see that style of inventory is in adventure games.
Yeah, for sure.
And so adventure. So, but that but the way those were because it still kept the adventure element of the old games. But like the item menu bar, like the quick menu, like the changing out of loadouts, the leveling up. Like those elements were all new to the game, and then the style of attacking, it was slow enough that it wasn't really like you wouldn't really call it just an action game. Because when you think about action games, what do you think of? You think of, like for it to be that slow paced, you wouldn't necessarily just refer to it today as an action game. Right, like the modern game that is the most similar to it was the very first Witcher game, and that is absolutely an action RPG. Like I think today's standards would call it an action RPG, but I also think that the old genre of action adventure, there are two modern categories that the old genre of action adventure belongs to, and that depends on which game it was. The first, and it was one of the most popular at the time, that would go into today's categories, is platformer. Crash Bandicoot was classified as an action adventure game.
Oof.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the second is action RPG. So if a game was called an action adventure game, I think in almost every case today would call it a platformer / action platformer. So like the difference. Mario's a platformer. Mega Man is an action platformer. And then then the other style of action adventure would be action RPG. I think in my opinion, freaking Skyrim is the evolution of games like Return to Krondor and King's Quest VIII.
The eventual evolution, yeah. And I think, I just want to say, I think all of this distinguishing that you're doing is very important. But I do think, since there's probably a ton of people who don't know what we're talking about for this game, we should probably talk about what the game is a little bit more if we're gonna have that much distinction.
Okay, so I'm gonna say the only thing
to talk more as much as you know so much more about this game than I do, because you are much more devotee than I was.
I'm the only person I know to have scored higher than the maximum score.
It does seem impossible.
When you beat the game, it says you've scored X out of X, and it gives you the maximum score. And I beat it like 2 or 3 times, and my score was higher than the total maximum score.
Like bad developers.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'm gonna say the only thing that needs to be said about this game, and that is this. Burr, 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 burr. Burr, 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 burr.
It did have a great
That's
score.
it. Yeah. No. They. So here's the. I guess I'll go through the story of the game. There's something called the Mask of Eternity, which somehow the mask is God. I'll never figure that out. And also, what's weird is the mask is God, and it that being there holds the entire world in place. The world devolves into chaos and spawns monsters if that mask is not in place and doing what it's supposed to be doing.
So spoiler alert.
Yeah, yeah. It's one of the mask's archons named Lucrito goes up and destroys it. But the reason why that's so interesting to me is because the mask is what holds the entire world together. That is, the entire world is based around this mask. How have we had 7 King's Quest games up to this point and never once heard about it?
Yeah, it does feel ham-handed. Like the whole storyline for the game just seems like a bit of a layup. Like, it seems kind of ridiculous that it wouldn't have at least been mentioned. And I can say with confidence that we would have noticed if it was brought up in the other 7 games, because I mean the ones that we didn't actively play through, we spent a lot of time watching our father play through them. So I mean, I feel like we would have noticed it, or at least Dad would have made a comment about it because he played and we watched him play the 8th one too, obviously.
Yeah.
So yeah, very ham-handed, and the entire storyline revolves around a very, very important artifact, we'll say, and this artifact exists in the universe of the other, probably 80 years of the existence of this universe.
Not quite. I
More like 60.
Probably less than that. Because I would say in the first one, playing as Graham in the first one, I would say it's easy for Graham to be in his 20s. I would say it wouldn't be younger than in his 20s in the first one, and he's not super old in the 8th one. I would say he wouldn't be above in his 60s. So I would say 40 to 50 years max from beginning to now.
Semantics for what we're talking about. Either
yeah,
we're saying
yeah,
it's a very
either
short
it doesn't
time
matter.
But everything in this game revolves around the magic of this game, and it's very fantasy oriented. I mean, like, it's not like you're casting spells and wielding giant swords or anything, but you do fight a minotaur. So.
No, that's in episode 6.
What I'm saying in the series is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I do have to say this too, though. I think I know why the mask was never brought up before, and I just thought of it. It doesn't make it any less, ham-fisted in the way that when you think of story development. But I just thought of something, and now I understand it and I get it. And that's this: there's always a new element introduced in each game, enough that every single game, even though like there's an overarching story that goes across from game to game, each individual game can be played as its own game without any trouble. You don't need to play any previous game or any future game to play and understand each single game. And that could be part of why they introduced that new element. It's just so, like, because you're not really, like, King Graham is there, he's mentioned, and he's talked about, but he's not really, like, an element in the game. The element in the game is the new character, Connor, who you play as, and the mask, which is brought in. And I think that could have been intentional.
I'm not saying it can't be intentional. I'm not saying it's wrong that it's intentional. I'm saying this thing is such a bigger point and such a bigger concept. It's such a huge concept that it seems kind of ridiculous that the thing holding the world in place wouldn't have at least been like brought up in some lore pages or someone talked about it. It's just very strange.
Well, I'm saying this thing, all things devours.
It's absolutely fine. It's just strange.
Yeah. What I'm saying is this thing, all things devours.
Oh, well, there's that.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah, continuing along with the story.
Moving on,
yeah. So Lucrito, one of the mask's chief archons, destroys the mask, and then he yeah, and then you and so everybody gets turned to stone except for the people who don't. So you are one of the people. You're not turned into stone because the mask has just enough power left that a piece of it flies through the world and you catch it, and then while you're holding it, the magic wave, the vile tempest is what it's referred to as, comes through and turns everyone into stone except for you. And in your village, the only other human who's not turned to stone is a very powerful wizard who, even with his most powerful magic, could only prevent half of his body from turning into stone. Which means that he's still, like, he's awake and sentient and conscious. So he's not like, you know, like, I'm sure the other people are, like, frozen in space and time, you know? But he's not. Which means that through all this time, that, you know, so he just has, like, an angle. So it's basically from his belly button up, and only one of his arms is able to move and not be stone. So this whole time that you're off adventuring, this man is conscious, but he's not eating, sleeping, drinking, or peeing. But he'll have the urge and need to do all of these things. Like, this wizard's gonna die.
Yeah. I guess he could probably be kept alive. Well, he has a bird who can bring him stuff. I mean, be alright.
Now his bladder's still gonna explode. His urethra is made of stone.
He's a wizard. Either way.
Like, you ever had a tracheotomy for your bladder?
I think they call those, oh, dang it. That would have been really funny if I would have just said it. Now it's lame. I didn't want to say it now. Forget I said it. Keep going. Urethra. I've got it. Okay. Close enough.
But, so that happens, and then a bunch of evil monsters spawn out of nothing. I don't know if they just teleport there, or I like to think that there were, like, mice that turned into the goblins and stuff. You know, and then you, so you figure out what's going on. You make it into the dimension of death, where all the skeletons have turned evil, which it's convenient that they turned evil for you to have gone there, because in most games skeletons are already evil, but they're good. They're actually good in this world. But the skeletons have to be evil, right? And so it's convenient, very, very convenient, that you showed up just in time for them to have turned evil. So you go through and you do that, and you fight an invincible enemy who can only be killed by smacking him enough times to knock him backwards over the ledge, which is very important later in the game.
Very.
And then you make it out and you go into the swamp, and then the swamp witch, like, I guess the swamp witch, like, also just popped up with the Tempest, but because she'd taken up residence there, but she had plenty of time to make brews and poison the swamp and do all sorts of this other crazy stuff. So I really don't understand you know, how that's supposed to work, but whatever. And then you see King Mudge, who's a giant snail, and he has the magical ability to swim in a circle, which opens up a passage to the underground realm of the gnomes. Or as King Mudge says, the underground realm of the gnomes. So you go into the then you go into the underground realm of the gnomes, and because the gnomes aren't humans, they didn't get turned into stone. And so you go there and you talk to them, and they say, "Oh yeah, there's a way out. Go ahead and go." And so you go to the way out, and there's a dragon there, and you turn around and go back and say, "Hey, the way out's guarded by a dragon." They said, "Oh yeah, I forgot." And so they help you to get a blade that can. No, wait, no, that's a different dragon.
Specific when we're telling the story.
There's a black dragon. That's what it is. There's a black dragon there, and he's guarding a he's guarding a lodestone, I think, that allows you to open up the portal, which then lets you teleport to the fire world. And then in the fire world, you do all sorts of crazy stuff, and you get a fire gem to melt some ice to, because there's a sword that is made of fire, and it's the only sword that can kill a certain dragon, because you have to cauterize the wound. You can only kill it by cutting off its head, but if you cut its head off, it'll just grow back. So you need to be able to cauterize the wound so it can't grow its head back. And then there's all sorts of craziness that you have to go through to pull that off. and so there's that, and so you get you get your craziness taken care of, and you do that crap, and then you
Yeah.
I forget what I'm talking about. Oh yeah, and then you so then you make it to the that was the Frost World. That was in where you got out of. Then after you leave the Frost World, you make it to you go up and up and up, and that takes you to the Sanctum Sanctorum, which is where the mask is, and there are all sorts of crazy enemies up here. Like crazy enemies that I enjoy greatly. There's like do they call them Naga? I don't remember, but it's like a woman snake that tongue punches you, which is a lot worse than it sounds, and so then you do that, and you wind up finding like the full armor of God, and
Yes.
you
That's what it is.
you eventually find Lucredo. And then you remember, you attack him and nothing happens. Then you remember, oh yeah, that skeleton that I had to knock off the cliff. And so there's a portal, and you knock him back into the portal. And he goes, ah! And goes out into the portal and dies. And then you put a piece of the mask on the altar. And he pops back out and says, ha-ha! And you're like, oh crap! And so you knock him into the portal, and he goes, ah! And falls into the portal and dies. And you put another piece of the mask on the altar. And then he pops back out. And you do that several times, and then eventually you get the final piece of the mask on the altar, and the portal closes on him, and Lucredo is forever dead.
Good. I'm glad he dies. He sucks.
At least I think that's right. I can't remember if that's the case, or if if he only knocked him to the portal once, and you have to fight. You knock him back, then every time you knock him back, then you have the opportunity to put a piece of the mask on the altar, while he's stunned. And then he comes and attacks you again, and then putting all the pieces on the altar opens up the portal, and then you can knock him to the portal and kill him. I forget how it is exactly, but yeah, and that's how that is, and that's the Sean synopsis summary of Mask of Eternity. There's a lot more to it than that. There's amazingly fun puzzles. It is truly a King's Quest game at heart, a genuinely good adventure game, but they added a bunch of action RPG elements, and it is my favorite King's Quest game, and that's including the new ones on PS4. I like those, but I definitely, oh boy, do I like King's Quest 8.
King's Quest 8 was kind of the first time that we got to get into a game that's like that, and that's kind of turned into it kind of has always been our favorite style of game. If we were to always go out and pick out like what's your top 5 games, I mean, we're going to find several action adventure / action RPG games being in those top 5. That kind of became our favorite style of game, and maybe it's because of playing these types of games so early, I don't know. Not to get off track, but I will say the new King's Quest games, the 2-parter, is really great. And it's kind of a throwback to the original King's Quest games. There's no real combat, lots of fetch quests, some light puzzle solving, that kind of thing. So it's I don't think it's meant for it to be anyone's favorite King's Quest game as much as it's meant to be a nostalgia game. So I'll say that it's perfect because it did exactly what it was supposed to do. But,
Did Roberta Williams have anything to do with that one?
Yeah, I don't remember, but I don't remember seeing her name when we looked. I remember we looked up because we were curious, and I don't remember seeing her name. So who knows?
Yeah, but yeah. Which by the way, an example of video game that was an example of a video game that was because I'm not the type of person that says video games or stuff made by girls are bad. My first example of a video game, I will give an example of a video game made by a woman that I hate, and that is Mass Effect Andromeda.
That's just because it's an awful game.
Yeah, but then again, Roberta Williams made the first 8 King's Quest games, and I can't think of her name, but it was the girl who made the first 2 Uncharted games, or 3. I can't remember if she made the first 2 or the first 3. Fantastic, phenomenal games. I don't think there's anyone who doubts that. So you guys don't think we're too sexist. Some of our very favorite games were made by women. There you go. Actually, the 2 games that last time we listed as being the perfect games was the first Uncharted game and King's Quest 8, and both those games were made by women. So there you go. Take that fact.
Yeah. For us, the perfect games. I am going to derail now because unless this entire episode was meant to be about King's Quest 8,
it's not.
We've already talked a fair bit.
yeah, absolutely. So it was just talking about games that we enjoyed from childhood that you guys may not have enjoyed, that you may either didn't enjoy or didn't play or maybe didn't even know existed. The next one I'm going to mention, and I'm going to let you talk about this one, Tyler, is a game that I would put money on none of you having heard of. I could be wrong, but I would be willing to bet that none of you have heard of this game.
This was the Donut Man's Adventures.
No, mine and Tyler's collective favorite game as children, and as young teenagers, I guess, and that would be Cyberdogs.
Ooh, yes, okay, yes, collective favorite for sure. Ooh, how to describe Cyberdogs? So Cyberdogs is technically it's a very simplistic game. As far as I can tell, unless there's it's like one of those games where the lore is actually so deep there is lore you just don't know about. There is no story to this game. Essentially, you have I don't remember which view it's technically classified as, but it's the God view. 5th person, is that technically what that's called?
Isometric.
Isometric. It'd be the same. It's imagine playing. I kind of always thought about it. It's isometric, so it looks like you're playing Diablo. It came out roughly the same time as Diablo 1, a few years earlier, I believe. I guess it's not called Diablo 1; it's called Diablo. But essentially, you play as these little guys. The only way you can tell them apart is one has a different color hair, one's bald, one has sunglasses. And you run around these maps, and the goal to get through them varies, but essentially comes down to collecting hidden items, killing a certain number of bad guys, and destroying some of these. Every once in a while, on the harder levels, you'll destroy these structures that look like they're vaguely powering something. They're black and red, so they look evil, of course. There's probably another objective for some of the levels I'm forgetting, but those are the important ones. And you essentially just run around these maps with as many guns as as many of the guns as you want to have. There's a power gun. There's essentially like a Gatling gun. There's a blaster. There's probably 10 weapons, I want to say.
Let's see. Let's go down the list.
8.
There's the first is the blaster. Then there's the upgrade is the power gun. And then there's the minigun, which is our favorite weapon.
Yes.
And then there's the flamer. And then there's the launcher. And then the launcher's upgraded into the mega gun. So that's 8 guns that I can think of.
Okay. So
and of course the chainsaw.
Arsenal, technically speaking, but I can tell you that that's all that you need for what you're doing, easily.
Mm-hmm.
So you run around. There's various different enemies. They're skinned slightly differently. You also have other weapon, chainsaw. So essentially, when you run into an enemy, you don't actually activate a chainsaw, but if you come in contact with an enemy, you will be damaged, and they will be damaged. And the higher number of chainsaw you have, the quicker you will kill them. Obviously, when you have a chainsaw, you can upgrade it in your menu before you start each level. And I'm sure it just means it's being upgraded. But I always kind of like to think when you got the chainsaw,
you're getting more chainsaws.
Yeah, chainsaws.
How are you holding 5 chainsaws?
And this gun, and this other 6 guns. But essentially, you would run into enemies and you would kill them. and the speed at which you killed them depended on the level of chainsaw you had. And so some enemies were exceptionally fast, didn't even shoot you. They just would kill you very quickly with their chainsaw, and they were very, very fast. They'd just run up on you, and they were very hard to survive, actually. So, excuse me. Some enemies had different guns, slightly different amounts of health, but essentially, whichever direction you were facing is where you were shooting. I mean, obviously that's the way it is with most games, but it's not like you could aim around again being isometric. You just whatever direction your eyes were looking is where you were shooting.
So it wasn't like Gauntlet or Alien Invasion games like that.
It was very, very simple. It's almost like a proof of concept game is kind of what it felt like.
Yeah,
it felt like a proof of concept game for something that was going to be bigger.
It's the precursor. It was the precursor. This is the best way to describe this game to people who haven't heard of it and are having trouble envisioning this. It was the precursor to twin stick shooters.
Yes. So, I mean, again, Diablo,
but it was a single stick shooter,
just like Diablo, but obviously much less complex. I mean, obviously in Diablo you've got all these different abilities, you're watching cooldowns, you have a wider variety of enemies that do completely wildly different things, and bosses. There are no bosses in this game. You'll never see, like, a bigger guy with a health bar pop up. It was very simplistic, which is very strange that we latched onto as aggressively as we did for so long, because it is very simple. It's the most bare bones way you can make a game, and maybe that's why we liked it, because it's, I don't want to say it's perfect, because I would have loved to have some boss battles. I would have loved to have some storyline. That would have been cool. But so I wouldn't call it perfect, but I think we played, as far as when we played together, I'm not going to count playing Call of Duty together over the years. After that, that's obviously ridiculous to try to compare it. As far as like a game that we just played together, and we're talking like, couch co-op. We were, 4 hands on a keyboard is what we were doing with a split screen. And I don't even want to try to guess how many hours we put into this game, just beating the same thing over and over and over again.
Well, it's so much fun.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't we, on your old YouTube channel, didn't we have a video of us co-oping this?
Yep.
I think I seem to remember having that. That's been years.
Yeah, I screwed up the intro to that video. I opened up with, "Hello everyone, my name is Cyberdogs."
And why would we ever change that?
Yeah.
But yeah, that probably came out in the very early 90s. We got a hold of it. Did we find it in like a share? Do we have a shareware disc? Is that what it was? Or
yep, it was on those old discs where it's like disc number 1 has arcade games. Disc number 2 has action and adventure games. Disc number 3 has role-playing games.
Which always reminds me of the greatest... I don't even know if we could... I guess it's still considered shareware. This was hands down the greatest concept of any entertainment thing I've ever seen in my life. There was a disc that we had in... I don't know how long we had it, but we were using it in the late 90s and early 2000s. But there was this, essentially it was a game where you were walking around in a space station, and each different portal you could walk up to was a demo of a different game.
And
for the life of me, I can't remember what it's called, but
that disc was called Games for Windows 95.
It was the most incredible concept. It's unlike anything I'd ever seen before and I've ever seen since. I'm sure something else has or existed like it. But if you're an old school gamer, you'll probably remember those PlayStation 1 discs that would come out. And
the ones that were actually called demo discs.
The
ones that were actually called PlayStation demo discs.
Yeah, they were called PlayStation demo discs. There was a handful of them that I remember.
You can get for $5
that
came
5 or 6 games on them. And this was kind of like that, except for at least 20 games on this thing.
Something like that. I'm trying to remember how many of them were games and how many of them were just like the new Zork game. They made a new Zork game and you couldn't play it. You stepped into the portal and it showed a big long trailer for it. And then some pictures and stuff of it. So it was like the only thing we really ever did on is we wandered around because the PlayStation, the space station was fun to run around, and then we would just run. It was so much fun. We'd jump around, do all sorts of stuff, and then we would eventually we would get to Fury 3 and play that, and that was it. That's all we played was Fury 3, which I actually got Fury 3. I downloaded it.
It's amazing.
The full game sucks.
Mm.
The demo was fun. The full game, like the demo level, it's packed with enemies and you have to go and find and do what you're doing and do all that stuff and whatever. That level is not in the full game. The full game is just so bare bones. You're flying over nothing. You run out of fuel before you get anywhere. And, like, you see 2 enemies. Like, it was horrible.
Nothing has ever disappointed me more in my life than hearing what you just said. I just want you to know.
And also, do you know what the game was about? The game was published by Microsoft. The bad guys, which is the bad guys in the game. The whole reason why you're going through hunting them down and killing them is because of how evil they are, and what they did that was so evil. Huh?
Please tell me they're Apple. Please say they have something to do with Apple.
They're software pirates.
10 out of 10. Greatest game ever.
Also, what makes it better is how I got the full version was I pirated it.
10 out of 10.
It was fantastic.
Yeah. That's a throwback. That's another late 90s, early 2000s. That's like very, very low polygon count 3D games. Very low polygon count 3D games.
Yeah, you said, and you said for Fury 3, late 90s, early 2000s. That was a demo to show the games you're going to be able to play on Windows 95. So it was like the first thing for Windows 95. It was called Windows 95 because it came out in 95. So now it's not quite late 90s. It's exactly mid 90s.
This is true. Man, I don't even care about the rest of the things that you could do other than run on the space station and play that game. But that was this is back when gaming. It's obviously very different than it is now, because back then console gaming was obviously. I mean, by the time you got to 1995, console gaming had gotten bigger. It was bigger than PC gaming probably at the time. So you kind of wonder.
Yeah, so it started off way bigger than PC gaming. Honestly, Windows 95 was probably the push. That's where PC gaming, because PCs weren't made to be gaming machines and they weren't really prepared for it. At that time, you had to have specialized machines. Windows 90, the era of Windows 95 was right around the time when you no longer had to have specialized machines. Windows 95 and 98, probably 95 was then. And so like we had at that same time we had a Sega Genesis, and it was made, and it had better games than you had for Windows 3 and all that, because it took until around that time for the PC to catch up. But boy, once it caught up, it caught up.
Yeah, and that was the thing. That was the push, and it was really. I just recently watched. There's a really, really good documentary that's just about the evolution, creation, whatever, of video games from the start. It's on Netflix, and I wish I could remember what it's called right now, because everyone should go watch it if you like video games at all. Excuse me. It's a fantastic documentary, and it kind of shows the start of computer games. There's a big long section with Romero,
cool.
and obviously how Doom started, and how he made the worst game of all time.
Which was that?
Then just kind of,
Which one was that?
Daikatana.
Oh, I forgot about that game.
So bad.
Okay, yeah, but let's talk about how John Romero was probably, I almost said George Romero. John Romero was probably the most brilliant, most creative, and most ingenious programmer of all time.
Yes. I don't think most people really understand how groundbreaking Doom was. I mean, if you were alive at the time, be like, wow, this looks way different. But I mean, like, if you actually look about like what they had to do to make Doom work, how Doom actually works, and then what they did to get it there, he's an absolute unstable genius.
So for anyone who doesn't know, the original Doom game is literally a 2D game that tricks you into thinking it's 3D.
Yeah. Which is crazy.
Like, they didn't actually make 3D until Wolfenstein 3D.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing. And that's the reason why it's so funny, is if you play Wolfenstein 3D and Doom next to each other, very few people are going to go, holy cow, look at the shocking difference in the graphics between these two games. But one is 2D and one is 3D. And the Doom team, ID, whatever, geniuses, absolute geniuses. And you think about how they're making this game, like, in a room by themselves, obviously a dark room because it was Doom, and it's just they're incredible. That's where you think about the real turn of it turning into a PC master race for gaming. That was like a point you can point to that point and be like, that's one of the most pivotal moments, in my opinion.
Okay, also let's talk about how Doom was so good that once it was finished, the rest of the id team couldn't get Romero to work on any other games because he kept locking himself in his office and playing Doom. And
why wouldn't you?
This is a true story. One of the other guys, or maybe it wasn't Romero who did that. Maybe Romero is the one who broke in. But someone locked themselves in their office just to play Doom when they should have been working, and they could not get him out, to the point that one of the other guys took a literal, it wasn't an actual real one, it was a wall hanger, but we'll call it a literal real one, a literal battle axe, and chopped his door down with an axe to drag him out of his office to go to work.
That's absolutely phenomenal.
And it's only the id team that would have done that sort of thing.
Yeah, like, only the id team would have had someone who would have done that, and only the id team would have broken his door down with an axe to get to him. At the end of the day, they're all like, yeah, man, it's a Thursday. That's how we do. But we are digressing.
Yeah, we're digressing, but we... Okay, do you want to... Okay, so here's the kicker. We're running about 10 minutes shy of how we normally go. I have another thing that we could talk about, but who knows how long we'll go if I start talking about Yendor. Should we make it 10 minutes short, or should we make it who knows how long and talk about Yendor?
I'm gonna let you decide that, because you're gonna be the one talking about Andorian Tales.
Okay.
I played Andorian Tales. I did not devote a chunk of my life to Andorian Tales. And you did.
I never beat it.
Huh?
I never beat it.
Well, yeah, neither did I. Do we want to just gloss over a few more old school computer games? Like, you just want to, like, briefly touch on the concept of, instead of going to a story or anything, want to briefly touch on, like, the development of that same type of thing, saying Yendor, and then maybe, like, we can hit a good platform or mention Commander Keen.
Let's do Commander Keen. I think we'll talk for less time about Commander Keen.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Goodbye Galaxy. Let's see. Goodbye Galaxy. The Commander Keen saga. Goodbye. 4. Well, Goodbye Galaxy was a series that took up 3 or 4 games. The first in the series, or maybe the second, I don't remember. I think it's the first. Was Aliens Ate My Babysitter. I think that was the first one in that series. And that's the one that we had on the demo disc and we played so much of. And
4 was hold on. Secret of the Oracle?
Oh yeah, that's right. Aliens Ate My Babysitter is after Secret of the Oracle. Secret of the Oracle is the one that or it's something. I think it's something about the Oracle. Yeah, Aliens Ate My Babysitter is number 5. Yeah, but it's 4, 5, and 6 were the were the Goodbye Galaxy saga. Yeah, Secret of the Oracle, is the demo. That's right. Aliens Ate My Babysitter is the next episode. Commander Keen 5, Goodbye Galaxy episode 2 was that one, and then episode 6 is the finale. It's a 3-parter. Didn't play too much of that. We beat not as often as we would have liked, not as many times as we would have liked. Did we beat freaking
4.
Yeah, 4. And
In fact, the only game we could get our mom to play.
Yeah, we used to get Mom to play Raptor, Call of the Shadows, but then she realized that, or I made a statement. I said she shot an airplane, and I said, yeah, kill that guy. I was probably 3 or 4 years old, and mom said, oh no, there was a guy flying that airplane, which technically there wasn't. If you read the lore of the game, those are drones, which makes it even funnier. Which makes it even funnier. My mom goes, "Oh no, there was a guy in that plane, and I blew it up." And Mom couldn't bring herself to play that game anymore because she thought she killed someone in a video game. And that's a legitimate true story.
Oh, Mom. Well, fun fact. You can get. I'm not gonna act like I know this. Just from the top of my head, because I did check this out. We wanted to segue into Commander Keen because, technically speaking, that's an id game.
Yeah, it is. It's made made by id, and so id and Apogee had a weird relationship, right? It was made, created, done by id, but then Apogee had it and made it and finished it, but then id was supposed to have made it, and then they got mad and didn't make it, and they made something else, and there was Commander Keen is an id game. Also, Commander Keen, his name, I forget his name, but his last name is Blazkowicz, which makes him the great grandson of BJ Blazkowicz of Wolfenstein.
Which makes sense to me. That's who it would be.
Yeah, and then there's also Doom Guy is also somehow determined that he's a Blazkowicz, and which is weird now, knowing that Keen is now somehow an ancestor of, or is an ancestor of or to the Doom Guy, which makes it really weird when you go in Doom 2, you find a secret room and there's a bunch of Commander Keens and you get to kill them. Which they added that after the breakup of id and Apogee, after they had their falling out. So they just had Doom Guy killing Commander Keen just as an FU to Apogee.
Which is beautiful.
And yeah, that's so that's Commander Keen. But yeah, there's no need to go into the story of Commander Keen. It's there. It exists.
There's no need to go into the story, but there is worth mentioning this. I'm looking at this right now. For $5, you can get Commander Keen Invasions of the Vorticons, which is episodes 1, 2, and 3, and Commander Keen and Goodbye Galaxy, which is episodes 4 and 5. This is $5. Now, for the record, so this is a side scroller. Technically speaking, it's one of. I don't think it's the first, but it's one of the first PC side-scrolling games. And when people always, a lot of kids we knew that played games, played Mario. We didn't play Mario. This is our platformer. Commander Keen was our platformer. This is absolutely a game that anyone who even remotely likes retro gaming should be playing, or should play at some point. It's fantastic. Everything about it's fantastic. And Sean, you might not know this. Maybe you do. There is a Commander Keen game in development that was announced in 2019.
Really?
I'm looking at it right now.
I did not know. That's
hold on, actually. I take that back. It was released in 2019. It is an Android and iOS game.
Okay, here you go. The plot thins. Yep, right there. Keen Dreams Definitive Edition 2020. Released in 2020. Platforms: Microsoft Windows and Nintendo Switch.
Well, I have a Switch, and I know what I'm doing here in an hour.
I'll get it for Windows.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff. That's very. I don't even think I'm gonna like it. It looks very different, but I feel like
I want to see if it's on Steam.
it's not.
It's not. You just checked.
Yeah, I searched it a second ago as I was doing this. I was gonna try to act like I could talk about it, but well, no, I looked up Commander King. Let's see if King's Dreams on here. Sorry, everyone. We are officially diverting to our own devices.
This is the one you found on Steam. It's episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah, that's the only thing I can find. Well, anyways, go get that. If you play games on Steam, it's $5, and that's for all 5 episodes. That's an awful lot of hours of entertainment for $5. If you hate retro gaming, if you only like modern games, okay, you suck, but that's fine. If you have any care about them at all, then go pay $5.
Yeah, but
not sponsored, not a sponsor.
Yeah, and so I have to say this: it probably was the first PC side scroller. It was released in 1990, and the other early game that I was thinking of that could have been a contender for it was the game. We know it as Halloween Harry, but it was actually released as Alien Carnage. And that was 1993.
Oh, man.
Oh, so I discovered something last time I played this game, and you're going to be so upset to hear it. While you're swimming in the swimming levels, if you tap control, you have a burst of speed, and you can keep tapping to get a constant burst of speed. And when you do that, you can outrun the big doofus fish.
It's so many stressful moments of my childhood that could have been avoided.
Yep. But yeah, that's all that needs to be said.
Go check all of these things out. Go look at all these things. I mean, obviously, if you're not going to find this on YouTube, we have no way to link you to anything. So if you're just listening to this on any kind of a podcast site, just go look them up.
Yeah, I'm actually. So yeah, you guys really need to get into the Discord. Get in the Discord, and I'll tell you why. One of the games that we mentioned, we didn't really talk about it. It's honestly, of all the games we talked about, it's my favorite. But we just didn't talk about it because there wasn't much to talk about in there. But it's my favorite of all the games on this list. And I'm going to drop this game into the Discord because it took me years to find it. A full playable version of it. And so for that reason, I say you should I say that you should
Sean's trying to do things while he's talking.
Yeah.
This is what always happens.
I am. Yeah, you should absolutely get and play this game. It took me years and years and years to find the full version of this game for download because you had to buy it from Webfoot, and Webfoot no longer sells it. So it's impossible to buy. I would have paid full price for it if they would have let me, but they wouldn't. And so I had to search and search to find a place that had the full version for download. I just dropped it in the Discord. You guys got to go to the Discord and download it. Yandorian Tales 3, Tyrants of Thane. I just dropped the zip file in there. You guys will also need DOSBox to run it. I'm not going to teach you how to run DOSBox. Figure it out.
DOSBox is the greatest thing of all time, for the record.
But
yeah, I can't confirm I actually just now dropped it because I just watched it hit my Discord. So if you were in the Discord, you'd know that.
But yeah, as always, we will be linking the Discord in the thing. We have talked on and on and on, but I think we're at pretty much exactly the hour mark, that means it's time for us to go. Bye!
So we're gonna go.